Hi guys, welcome to my third and final video of my Brains, Books and Body series. Today I'm going to do a quick run through on some of the stuff that you could think about in relation to your body. I'm going to cover two parts to this. I'm mainly quite holistically rather than practical, but I'll give you a couple of practical examples as well. The first area I'm going to cover is your eyes and sort of what you can do with your eyes to keep yourself focusing on the targets that you expect to when you get back, or just making sure that you're keeping the eye muscles moving the way they should be. Again, I'm not going to claim to be an expert on this, but just a couple of things that might be worth thinking about. So there's two things that I have on standby. Well, one thing mainly, which I hope you all have in your arsenal, is a tennis ball. Now, a lot of people use these when they're out sort of prepping for competition or doing a bit of training, sort of warm up the reflexes, warm up the eyes, and make sure the hand-eye coordination is where it should be. And this is the perfect opportunity to practice exactly that. Now, you don't need to have a wide vast of open space, and I actually don't think we're even allowed to be going outside and playing ball games anyway. You just need a little bit of wall like the one I've got behind me, where you can just bounce up against it using alternating hands, putting one hand behind your back, just using one hand, and vice versa, and really making sure that you sort of focus on the areas that you're sort of struggling the most. So for example, really making sure that you are focusing on the movement of the tennis ball rather than sort of just looking at a spot, or maybe sort of looking at a spot and relying on your peripheral to sort of pick up on the movement on the direction of the ball before conducting the reaction. There's lots of different variants that you can do. The one I quite like to do is just sort of throwing with the right, catching with the left. So you're kind of exercising both sides, but in both cases making sure that my dominant eye is the one that's picking up the movement of the ball, just to make sure I'm sort of not getting lazy and just relying on my left eye, because I know in my shooting that's sometimes what causes some inaccuracy. So yeah, that's one such example. Right, the next phase of this is going to be talking a bit more about the body and sort of your overall movement and your posture and what you should be thinking about in order to kind of maintain yourself in the best way you can be for when you are able to return back to your sport. Now, for shooting, although sort of you're relatively stationary, particularly in Olympic skeet, you need to be able to have that mobility and that movement, and as well as have the endurance to keep executing that movement consistently. So whilst we're sort of unable to kind of take the recoil in the same way that we would usually be able to, this is a really good opportunity to work on what exactly that full body movement should feel like. Now I'm going to refer to kind of the first video I did around sort of your mind, your meditation, and kind of learning to execute everything you do based on feel as opposed to doing. So when you're doing exercise, or particularly when I find I do exercise, I don't aim to kind of, rip myself to shreds on the nearest machine or pump some seriously heavy weights to try and burst a sweat and wake up the next morning feeling like a plank of wood. The objective is completely different for me. It's about going to the gym to get a feel of where sort of my areas of tension are, to be able to stretch them out to the way they should be, and then being able to work the right groups and making sure I'm executing each movement very cleanly and clearly, so that I'm working the right groups of muscles in order to deliver the movement well. Now in Olympic skeet, there's lots of hearsay about sort of how you should be moving, but some people say that you should be driving the movement from your ankles and up through your body, which to me is a little bit too particular. I'm very much sort of focused on what that overall movement is and really making sure that every part of my body is moving in synchronization to what I'm seeing, which I think is the most critical. So what that means is that you shouldn't just necessarily be pumping iron on your shoulders and your arms and your upper back, which is where you'll be taking a lot of the beef for having a heavy gun and pumping with the recoil, but also thinking about your lower back, which is supporting all of that posture, your bum, your legs, all the way through to your ankles and your feet, and making sure that you are planting yourself and distributing your weight in the correct way. So a couple of things which are always in my arsenal, and I really encourage you to get to think about getting, potentially going forward. First thing is a bunch of resistance bands. Now, when someone first told me about these, it kind of struck the fear of God into me, because I thought, this stuff is very, very firm. It's a bit technical, like I don't really know what to do with them. But actually, there's a really simple system associated with these, and you'll see, particularly on these ones, these are in solder branded ones, you'll notice on each one there's a 5 blob system. So this one's a 2 blob, which means it's like a 2-level firm fitness, whereas the firmest one you've got is black, and you'll see that the blobs are 5 blobs, and you'll see that the resistance there is much greater. What's really good about these is that it allows you to be able to do sort of some strength and resistance based exercises, which allows you to build up a little bit of strength but also challenge your stability a little bit. So for example, you could be doing sort of almost, I'm not going to get the names of any of these right, but hopefully I can describe them the right way. When you're lying on your side, sort of arm underneath your shoulder, and able to kind of execute a bit of a push against against the resistance band. So if you've got sort of 2 legs, this is your hip here, able to pull one leg up against the resistance band and back down again. That sort of arch of doing that resistance over and over and over again will allow you to do a nice strengthening exercise in your legs and sort of inside your groin area, and also inside your bum, which is very important. Then another one which I quite like to do is very simple squats. So just doing some squats but with some resistance in there. So when I start out on the exercises, I might start with some gentle activation, and that's a really important word that you should be thinking about when you're doing gym exercises. It's about activating the right parts of your body to do the right movement. Before I go into anything heavy, I do a gentle roll of my feet using my glutes to slowly push against the resistance band to kind of get them working, get them resisting, and get them executing in the way that I want them to. And that's a really nice little warm-up exercise before you then go into squats, rolling this further up the legs and being able to execute your squats, whilst keeping your legs and your knees and bending in a relatively straight line. If you've got knobbly knees like me, you'll find that that is potentially a little bit more difficult, but again, can really serve as a good stabilising exercise for when you're actually eventually executing that movement for a twist and skeet. So yeah, these are all really, really good, and obviously you don't have to be building, loads of muscle. You could just be looking to mobilise things, get things activated in a similar way that you would look to do so before going into a competition or for training. So really good selection of stuff there. I highly recommend getting these. The second one, which is something that I value very greatly, and actually I take with me everywhere, but isn't necessarily mission critical, but I think it's really good for testing your stability while standing and sort of doing some more cross movement work, is one of these, which is sort of like a great big elastic band with some handles on it. And what's really good is they come with one of these things, which look, to be honest, when I first got it, didn't really make any sense. But when you put this over the top of the band, you can close a door with that on the other side of the door, and then suddenly you've got some resistance. So really, really good. It means you can. It's definitely something you can do at home, and with some relative ease, be able to do some resistance work. So, for example, standing with if this was pinned to the door, standing with your back sort of against the door with a little bit of resistance, and literally just slowly raising your arm up and down, and sort of feeling the tendons and muscles in your shoulder starting to work to get that stabilization in your arm as you're doing that up and down movement. Similarly, that sort of short explosive action that you sort of see in a twist or a pull, you can really work on the technique for that by using a pulley like this. So again, with the pulley in the door, you can look to do sort of a cross body movement where sort of using your feet to ground yourself through the movement, feeling the movement up through your legs and across your hips, and sort of just slowly and surely just pulling it across, and doing reps on those obviously on each side. What I like about this is that, although, actually, I'll give you a story about this. So I actually bought this one after the lockdown, and I found I ordered a medium. The box said strong, and I ended up with a light. So the colours usually go green for light, blue for medium, and red for like strong for these guys. And I've ended up with a green. And initially I was like, what do I do with the green? I've always worked with the blue. But what's really good is you can tie them around things like a bedpost, or I don't know, a tree in your garden or something like that. And continue to do some strength-based exercises, but with a little bit more resistance, slightly tighter. You can tie them up against something like this to make the thing shorter. You can sort of loop it round something, so if you don't want to do it on a door frame and you want to do it on something lower, You can sort of do it on something lower and pull upwards. Basically, this is a very versatile tool, and again, is a really good way to activate different parts of your body. And again, can be done sort of before competition, after competition, etc., or as part of like a more regular routine. Now, did I ever do this sort of when I first started out? No. Did I know much about it? Probably not. But I've found definitely over the last sort of 6 months, a year, I've become a lot more cognizant of the impact of doing the work that we do on our bodies. You know, the imbalance it causes in terms of building up muscles on one half of your body and not the other, and making sure that you can manage that, particularly for me with like a desk-based job, or just being able to manage that with your sort of day-to-day life, and making sure that you don't get yourself into any sort of back leg bother sort of further down the line. So I hope that's helpful. I mean, I've got a couple, like I say, I've shared a couple of ideas there of things that I think might be quite helpful. Again, I'm not really an expert, and there's a lot of really good people out there who are providing some genuine expert advice for, you know, if that can inspire you to do different exercises of things that are worthwhile, and for you to play with stuff. Like, I mean, these are just glorified elastic bands, right? I mean, this is a great opportunity for you to play around with some of the kit that's out there, which is relatively cost and effective, but can give you a little bit of a workout and keep some of that muscular tone that you may not have noticed you've got, but you've probably got if you've been doing, you know, a regular activity for a sustained period of time. So definitely worth having a look. Just a quick one. So the bands was the Unfiltered bands, and these guys were, what are they? Fitness Mad Studio Pro lights. And both of those I got through Amazon. The only thing is that obviously at the moment, because of the demand on deliveries and the obvious sort of requirements for prioritization, this stuff does take a little while to arrive. So just be mindful about that if you're doing any sort of planning. So I'm going to stop there. I've rambled for a lot, but I hope you enjoyed the 3-part series. I'm sure there'll be sort of potentially some more coming up around the way if I pick up anything else or I find something that's particularly interesting. But equally, I encourage you to do the same. I think we all find it really good to find good content online, and you know, I definitely continue to get inspired by some of the stuff I see. So I really do encourage you to all do the same. Yeah, stay at home, stay safe, and hopefully see you on the other side of this.